Welcome to the Stop Digging Community Podcast, powered by the nonprofit A² Lamp Groups. I'm Christina, a joyful founding board member since 2014. Your truly unique self-development journey begins today with the first step. Stop digging.
Hello and welcome back to the A² Community Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Knierem of the Stop Digging Podcast. If you're in a hole, we recommend you stop digging, as I'm very passionate about leadership development and personal development. And today we have someone on our podcast we're very excited about. It's Reverend Doug Rumford, and he is going to tell us a little bit about what he does. I know that he's written a few books and a little bit about his origin story. So, Doug, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. It's a real joy and privilege to be here with you. So thanks for having me on. Yeah, I am a retired Presbyterian pastor, and I served 44 years, 22 years in the 20th century and 22 years in the 21st century. So I've seen a whole lot happen in that period of time as I've served churches on the East Coast in Connecticut, the West Coast in California, and even Kansas City. And it wasn't that I couldn't keep a job, Chris. I kept hearing new calls, especially to California, which I know really troubles a lot of people nowadays. But I retired after being the lead pastor, senior pastor of Trinity United Presbyterian Church in Southern California here, Santa Ana, Tustin area, about 8 miles from Disneyland. So I say to people, yes, I'm very familiar with the Magic Kingdom, but more so with the Kingdom of God. That's really my priority, is the Kingdom of God. And then after retiring, I began a new ministry called Lorica Ministries, Lorica. And just a little bit of background on that, and then I'll stop. Lorica is the Gaelic word for the breastplate, the piece of armor that shields your heart and your vital organs. And it's used with St. Patrick's breastplate, a prayer that people are very familiar with. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ above me, Christ behind me. All of these different ways in which the Lord's protection is around us. So our goal in Lorica is to equip people to experience Christ's abundant life through spiritual vitality and intentional living.
Oh, that is great. So 44 years, and then you found a calling to start this new ministry. That is, so this passion for helping people realize their connection with Christ and obviously drives you if you've been doing this for almost 50 years. Yeah,
it is a passion. And you talk about the origin story. I may talk about my call to ministry, but the call to Lorica was really a friend of mine, a man named John, who said, Doug, God has much more for you. And I was surprised. Not that God has more for me, but what he began to propose was a journey we began together, where in 1996, I wrote a book called Soul Shaping, and it was published by Tyndale House Publishers, a fairly well-known evangelical publishing house out of Wheaton or Carroll Stream, Illinois, and sold well for a rookie. I'm not a known commodity. If anybody knows me on your podcast, I'll be astounded. But they will when we're done, right? But
exactly.
I did that book, but after publishing it and after years of ministry and leadership training and leadership coaching and a lot of things that I do, I really wanted to rewrite it. And John said, Doug, let's start with rewriting Soul Shaping. The Lord has called me to help fund your dreams. And he said, what's your dream? And I said, I don't have any dreams. I was pretty exhausted. Just 5 years ago, actually. And he said, let's start with Soul Shaping. What will it take? So publishers don't want to republish a book that's been out if it wasn't a bestseller. So I began the route of independent publishing. We used to call it vanity press, but it's not. It's independent publishing. And long story short, we found an editor. And our daughter-in-law is a graphic artist, works for a lot of leading companies. She designed the book and all. And really began a whole new phase of ministry. And so I retired at the age of 69 instead of going to 70 to maximize everything. And I'm just actually redeployed into this new space. And it is so rewarding because I get to come alongside pastors who are really challenged with the cultural pressures the expectations, the erosion of a consensus about the values that many of us entered leadership and ministry with, all of those pressures, I get to come alongside to provide, I call it coaching for spiritual vitality, or you might call it spiritual direction or executive coaching, just coming alongside and helping people recenter in original call, being created to glorify God and enjoy him forever, as we Presbyterians say. But I don't just deal with Presbyterians, but just to help people live from the inside out rather than living for the outside, which is always changing and will always disappoint.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm really into Stoicism. I have a friend of mine who is always sending me things about Stoicism, and I remember reading one thing that said, one of the meditations from Marcus Aurelius saying, the only thing that matters is character. There's neither good nor bad. There are preferred indifferences. So wealth versus poverty, wealth is a preferred indifference, but poverty is neither good nor bad. What matters is character. Getting to talk to you, I have a feeling these are the kind of things that you're speaking about. So what is it that you find that your leaders that are looking for you, that work with you, what are they missing, or what do they want to work on?
I think they want to work on being independent of the variations of life. And that's what Stoicism does. It's a very different realm when we talk in terms of the spiritual realities, because we don't anchor them merely within the human being as a finite creature. We anchor them in, I would call, eternal realities here. But people want to be independent of all the variations of emotion and trends and all that could sweep them away if that was where they were focused. So I talk about 4 seductive voices of the world. The first one is you are what you do. This is performance. Do you want me to go into these?
Let's give a recap of all of them, and then we'll come back to them. How's that?
All right. So the first one is performance. You are what you do. Now, there's nothing wrong with performance. I love high-capacity leaders. I love working with high-capacity people. I try to be high-capacity and energetic. But when you base your identity on performance, there are going to be problems. I've been with people at all ages who've been afflicted with a stroke or devastated by illness or had, because of no fault of their own, financial things collapse around them, or they've made a really bad choice and they have to rebuild. If your identity is hooked to that performance, you're going to be in trouble. Productivity. The second one is you are what you have. And this one, in a materialistic culture, we tend to base status on where people live, what they drive, and all of that, and anchor our security in our possessions, our bank account, our resources, the 401k thing, all of that. And again, those are subject to incredible variations. And by the way, one of the stories I do talk about is the book of Ecclesiastes, where Solomon, who had everything, said life is like a puff of smoke. That's really what the word vanity of vanities, all is vanity is. It's futility. It's like a puff of smoke, a vapor. So even Solomon, who had everything in terms of what a human being, it wasn't there. And then the third one is you are who you know. And you've been in the acting business and the networks. You get all this. You are who you know. And I have friends who are name droppers. I tend to be a place dropper, like I was just in Paris, France, or something like that. I have the name dropper. You are who you know. But what you're doing is you're trying to, I call it guilt by association. It's not GUILT, it's GILT. You know, being made golden by who you know. Being a people pleaser, and that's one of the biggest things pastors struggle with. I don't know about all leaders. I don't find all leaders struggling with this, but those who are in the serving professions really want to be liked. And then the last one is you are your position. And I do a lot, believe it or not, with the Salvation Army and helping officers prepare for retirement. And officers in the Salvation Army are incredible. And they have sacrificed a lot. And you know what? They don't own a thing. They don't own a thing when they serve in the Salvation Army. And so when they leave, they get a stipend. It's fairly modest. It's 6 figures, but it's modest to buy a home, a car, furniture, and start a new life in retirement. And when you've been a captain or a major, lieutenant colonel or whatever, and now you're just Doug or you're just Chris, and you no longer have what I call that frame that kind of sets your portrait apart and that frame of reference, who are you? If you don't go into retirement, realizing retirement is just releasing the blessings and excessive burdens of your career so you can continue to make your ultimate contribution. If you don't know that, then you'll really struggle. So often I'll help a person identify which of those 4 seductive voices is the loudest in their life, and then anchor their identity in who they are in Christ and who God tells them.
Sorry to laugh. I think I get those voices all the time. And I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you what I really love about what you're saying. So obviously you're coming from a pastor perspective, right? And a very religious perspective. But even if we were to filter out potentially the religious piece to it, all the things that you're talking about are non-denominational, right? They'll work for the agnostic, for the atheist, for those who are religious. These are not tied particularly to religion, but obviously I would say it's a force multiplier for someone who has that kind of religious belief. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you look at some of the leading life coaches, and I don't know who's hip and cool now, Tony Robbins and Jack Canfield and Brene Brown, a lot of them talk about these very essential distinctions between where we anchor our value and where our value really is. So yeah, you're right. It's not limited to a spiritual framework. It's an emotionally healthy framework, no matter where you're coming from.
Yeah, and this is the right way to say this. There are certain, we'll call them universal truths for you. Obviously, it's rooted in religion, right? And your connection with God, right? This is where it is. But like I said, if you were able to take that out, if that was a red flag for someone, they would lose all this great information because of necessarily the religious tie. Oh, I'm not this, I'm this. So let's talk about the first one again. So let's go over your first tenet, because I have a few thoughts on it that I'd like to chat with you about.
Okay, so productivity and performance, you are what you do.
So I read, I think it was Atomic Habits, and it said one of the ways that you can change your habits is by changing your identity. So I wanted to share that with you is because of the performance piece. If you identify with, hey, I'm a high performer, and for whatever reason that doesn't come out, your identity goes into confusion, right? And from your perspective, you kind of lose your spirituality. Who am I? If I am not this, then what am I? And that can be very difficult for people. So how do you help people reframe that?
Yeah, that's a real good phrase to use, is reframing it, to change your thinking. And part of it is to begin to say to a person, who were you before you had that position? And then who will you be if you attain this position? What will change about that essential inner you? And I have so many stories, often out of marriages, but also out of other relationships, where people will say in a joint counseling session or whatever, I love you for who you are, not what you do. You don't have to do that for me to love you anymore. And usually, I think most of our problems are internally generated rather than externally imposed. And I think a lot of us think I have to achieve that so people think I'm better. Nope, they will love you if you're just a good person and love them and bring value to their lives. You don't have to impress other people. In fact, credentials can have a reverse impact. Like I keep it secret that I'm a pastor when I'm traveling. Like I sit down on an airplane, people say, what do you do? I say, I'm a consultant. And they're like, oh, that's interesting. In really long range planning. Really long range. And then I have some fun with them for a while. But people will immediately dismiss me because of what I do. That's the irony there. But
it's strange for those who are maybe not obviously have the faith that you do, or that they can find it off-putting. You're going to be let's say, bludgeoning them with religion or with your belief in Christ, as opposed to if you, like I said, you look at all the things that you're talking about, and I really hope people understand that these are like things that I talk to people about and I find fascinating. And the part that you said where it's internal, and I think that's the struggle, right? And it for me goes back to, let's say, your character or your integrity. So when you're out of alignment with those things in the pursuit of high performance and say, to be a high performer, I have to step on this person. And I've always found the people that I prefer to work with are the ones that are not, it's not from necessarily a religious standpoint, it's from their personal integrity standpoint is, hey, when my team succeeds, I succeed.
Yeah.
When I can build up the people who are working in my organization, then I feel fulfilled. And the other side of that is I'm threatened by people who are doing things in my organization, and I will take credit for it, which is one of the most toxic things you can do, in my opinion, in corporate. So these 4 pillars, let's say, that you have, right? This one is an important one. And I think when you get back to whether it's from your perspective, a religious perspective, a faith-based perspective, or someone else, it's still true.
And that whole thing about, like you brought in the corporate or the body, Max Dupree was the chairman of the board of Herman Miller Furniture Company, very successful. And Max wrote a book called Leadership is an Art. And he also wrote Leadership Jazz. And one of the things he said was, you can tell an effective leader not by the health of the head, but by the health of the body. In other words, are the people healthy? Is the team healthy? And that only comes when you're secure and confident in who you are, even apart from that team. You have to feel secure in who you are.
Absolutely. And those are the people that I always like to work with. One of the things I always challenge people is, again, I'll talk about it from the perspective of preferred indifference. I would prefer to work with someone who makes me feel part of a team, lets me buy into their vision and those kind of things. But you'll run into management styles that are very much, what are you doing? Why are you doing it that way? And it's constant negative feedback. And I had an incident like that. And the way I looked at it was, look, how do I work with someone like that? So then it's not external what this person is doing, it's internal. All right, this is a management style. It may not be the one I like. It's may not my preferred indifference. I would prefer this as opposed to the other. This is the reality of that I'm in. How do I deal with that? So the things that you're talking about being internal in these problems, I think will resonate not with everyone that is listening to the podcast.
Good.
All right.
Good.
Well, I knew this is going to be a fun conversation. So let's go on to number 2 and unpack that a little more.
Okay. That one was you are what you own, and possessions. You'll notice I have a little alliteration that goes with these: performance, possessions, position, people. But possessions. And for a lot of us, it's not necessarily, it's the status conferred and the sense of security that we find in what we have. Now, we live in Orange County, California. And when we first moved out here 16, 20 years ago, really now, people said, is it really like that? And we said, like what? Like the Real Housewives of Orange County. No, that's about 15 minutes down the road from me. But I've also learned that all over the country, there are people who are caught up in status. And I lived in Kansas City and I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut. I saw it in the Central Valley. But the idea is that where do you find your security? And it's not bad to own things. I'm not anti-materialistic at all. But it's when you put your hope and security in those things, then who are you if they're lost? And right now I'm reading through the book of Job. Well, let's talk about it. He lost everything. And we know these people. And in the depression of the 1900s, people were jumping out windows because of the stock market collapsing. Who are you? It's not easy to face up to losing everything. May that never happen. Pardon me, to any of us. Excuse me for one moment. I get all worked up and emotional. Sorry about that.
I like it. Because look, the other part I would say is just having passion for things. And it's obviously that you're passionate about it. And it's I would say it's important for people to hear. So, all right, now that we've cleared our throat, let's go on.
Like I said, one of the things I want to say in all of these is performance isn't bad, possessions aren't bad, being comfortable isn't bad, but what do you do with your resources? And when you see that your resources are entrusted to you, not only for your welfare and that of your family, but for the support of others, changes everything. The book of Proverbs says, one person gives away and has all they need, another hoards and loses everything. It's a Rumford paraphrase of Proverbs 11. Yeah. But the idea is that I can't live for status. In terms of possessions, they're not wrong to have them. It's not bad to have them. It's not bad to be comfortable. It's not bad to have life insurance and a bank account. I know there's all kinds of Christian debates over that, probably not with all of your audience. But anyway, but we all know what it's like to get a new car and then somebody runs into it. Or we got our first new car ever. We'd never bought a new car. And I was driving it, a rock right in the windshield that immediately spidered. You couldn't fix it. And I was like, okay, Lord, this is your car. I get it. So again, I'm really eager that, it's important to me that people understand that I'm not an all or nothing thinker. And this is where the stoicism could come in. I'm a moderate guy. I'm not this extreme, everything's bad, or I got to have everything. I'm like, be content with what you have and use it yourself and others.
Yeah, I think it's an important message, particularly now. Everything with, let's say, media, social media, it tends to focus on possessions or moments or things to have, right? Fast car, the fancy vacation, the dress, the jewels, the whatever it is that people are focused on to show, look at me, I'm somebody. And it gets, let's call it clicks. And at the end, if you think about it, it's just stuff. One of the things when we first had kids, I was like, look, I don't really want anything in the house that I care about, that if it breaks, I'm going to get upset about. And one of the things that we did with our kids was like, they would break something and I go, that happens. Everybody makes a mess. The only thing I require is that you clean up your own mess. So let's go over there. And if you need some help, I'll help you out. And this way, you're not overly focused on the thing. Oh, don't touch that. Don't do this. This is some heirloom or whatever. I think it was important for me to teach the kids that, like, these things are important. This moment, you're going to make mistakes. Things are going to break, this kind of piece to it. And it is difficult. This is a message that I hope people will hear very clearly, because it is, if we get out to a certain number of people, they will probably get 1,000 pieces of information or influence the other way.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really understanding that, yes, again, I'll use stoicism just to genericize it, as opposed to it is a preferred indifference. Prefer to have a nicer car as opposed to a car that I have to worry about. I would prefer to have a nice home as opposed to being homeless. But either one of those situations, your character, in your case maybe, or for some people, their faith, that is something that's internal to you. Mm-hmm. And you do not have to, wherever you land on that scale of possessions, that faith or that character in yourself can remain intact.
Yeah, and you don't gauge your worth and your value by that. My wife's parents lived in Punta Gorda, Florida, and lost everything in Hurricane Charlie. And they moved up and they stored some stuff, but they moved in with us, my wife and me, and moved in with us in Kansas City. And that's when I began to realize, wow, what do you have? What matters most is life. And now we live in Southern California. And if there's not a wildfire going whenever your people listen to this podcast, I'll be surprised, because we have wildfires all the time. And you have to have your go bag. You've all probably heard of a go bag. So you have your prescriptions and your papers and your
passport, birth certificate,
and your photos and your pets.
Computer, maybe, right? Yeah.
But anyway, you've got your go bag. And then when you realize all this may burn. I may come back to my neighborhood and just find ashes. You realize there's nothing I can do about that. And by the way, at the end of our days, we will leave this all behind. And so, yeah, having that perspective, by all means, enjoy it. But I like the phrase preferred indifference. Sure, I'd prefer that, but it doesn't control me and it doesn't identify me.
Yeah.
I am not what I own.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you. All right. So now we're on to number 3.
Okay, this is about people. I am who I know. People. And a lot of us struggle with
You
it.
love to run counterculture, don't you?
Yeah.
This is so different, really, from everything you would see on social media. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, I sure hope we get a lot of clicks on this.
Yeah, we'll see. I know you.
Yeah. But yeah, I am who I know, and people pleasing. And this is the idea, again, where people tell us who we are. Who tells you who you are? I had a coach. People say, do you do sports? I don't do second string, so no, I don't do sports because I didn't like it. But I had a coach who said, Doug, you're never going to make it in football. He said that to me in the 8th grade, and he was right. But was it because he said that to me? Doug, you're never going to make it. When I see some of the football players that make it, they're smaller than I was and stuff, but we often listen to the voices of other people. And of course, there are horror stories of abuse. You'll never add up to anything. You're worthless. These horrible things, but also that internal drive to please other people. And therefore, we compromise our integrity or we ignore our gifts. We don't have the courage to stand up when we should. Those kind of things can control us. And so, again, there's nothing wrong with networks, and there's nothing wrong with utilizing opportunities that come your way with people. But it's when you compromise your integrity and identify yourself based on who you know that you're taking a far lesser standard and a far lesser frame of reference than you were meant to have.
Yeah, it's interesting. You hit it really on two sub points, I would say, on this one, or 2 other bricks in this pillar that we're building. And that is, one is getting tied up to the people that you know, but also being susceptible to what other people are saying about you. And those 2 are, again, these are very counter to what is currently seems to be, I'll call it monetized, not necessarily valued, but it is monetized in our today's society.
Yep.
Is, hey, look at me, I'm with this person. Hey, look at me, here's my photo with this person. I'm that kind of person. I am with these people.
Yeah.
And the other piece is what people say. And I tell people, don't let other people curse you. That's what it feels like to me.
That's a good word.
It's like they're putting this thought in your head, and you don't have to accept it. You don't know what is their perspective that's making you do this. And I knew someone, and their spouse would say, you're stupid. This, and I was like, how can you say that?
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of discipline to say, hey, I'm not that. Particularly if somebody says it over and over again. It's almost like a little bit like brainwashing.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And here's a highly intelligent person. And so there's so many stories of that, particularly I think, for parents, for children, I maybe would be very careful on the way you use your phraseology. So I'll just share something that we did. I'd actually like to get your perspective on it. We never said that's good or bad, or you're good or bad, really, to our kids. Mm-hmm. What we said is that's not acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
Go. That behavior is not acceptable. You're fine as a person, but that behavior you're doing is not okay. And so look, as a parent of teenagers, they're going to push certain boundaries, and you just got they get into a little bit of trouble. I remember saying to my son, he's like, "Oh, I got detention." I go, "What'd you do?" And he goes, blah, 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 blah. And he said, "Do you think you deserve detention?" He goes, "Yeah."
Right. Exactly.
So really, it was just trying to teach them that it's part of the choice that they're making, but that the words, particularly of parents or of people that let's say you're married to, or those kind of things, where they say those things to you, it is very difficult to hear and to build up what I would call a muscle. It's almost like you're building up this muscle, and maybe that's not the right exact analogy. It's more like I'm more connected with I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what's going on with you right now, right?
Right.
But I don't have to take this on. Something is clearly bothering you that you feel the need to say something to me. And just to touch on this one, so I think for parents, maybe there's a perspective here that I would like to unpack a little bit with you. And that is, I identify as a good parent, so I expect my child to behave as this heavenly, all the time,
Yeah.
perfect in alignment with God and religion and society, without understanding that they're trying to figure out who they are. So they're going to push boundaries.
Right.
And we talked about Brene Brown, about the job of the parents is to hold boundaries and the job of the kids to push boundaries. And you're the first person holding those boundaries. I think watching your phraseology and trying to unpack these things, I think is important, particularly for parents, but this also happens a lot in business. What are you doing? That was dumb. What are you stupid? And people actually use that phraseology now. When I was a teacher and somebody would say something was stupid, I said, look, the only way you are going to get in a lot of trouble in my class is if you use this word.
Yeah.
Dumb,
Right.
stupid, these kind. If you say that about somebody else here,
Yeah.
I am going to have a problem with it.
Yep.
That is not acceptable in my classroom. And because it can linger.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening. A² Lamp Groups powers this podcast. Their memberships are tax-deductible donations that directly support their work developing people and organizations. But just for you, they're offering podcast listeners a special 40% off coupon code to join. Your benefits as a member include additional resources, perks, and access that you can use all year, including an additional 30 minutes of bonus podcast content for every episode. Simply use the code 4listeners at checkout. That's the number 4, all caps, listeners at checkout. They also are giving our listeners free gifts to use now. Go to their website, asquaredlamps.org/podcast, and download your free My Success Course of Action worksheet. There is no cost, registration, or sales pitch involved. Just click it and save. Use it to work on something significant to you this month, maybe even something that sparks interest from today's podcast. Then click to join our free but private Stop Digging Podcast LinkedIn group, where the conversation continues between you, the hosts, and our guests. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And now, back to the program.
And I'll just share one story. I was teaching 7th and 8th grade math, and we were really going over like positive and negative numbers. And one of the kids asked a question.
The budgets?
He asked a question, and I was like, you really don't know that? And the whole class laughed. And I went, and I took a moment, and you could see this boy, he was just like, and I'm like, and I took a moment and I said, I just want to say how much I appreciate you asking that question.
Good.
Because if you are struggling with it, I guarantee that there's somebody else that might be struggling with it, but was too afraid to ask. I appreciate you having the courage to ask me this question. Now we can work on fixing it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, no, that was a great response. That was a really good response in terms of a recovery, because you spoke honestly. Really, you haven't picked this up yet. But then you recovered well.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where I'm like, oh boy, this could make a big difference in this young man's life if not handled correctly. So you know how you take that thought and you're like, let me think through this on how to respond effectively, because I can't leave it here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I really like what you're saying, though. If you think of, I think of in terms of like my kids and the people that you hang out with, you become a lot like the tribe of people that you're hanging out. And I'll relate this to teenagers just because I have them and it's relevant to me at the time, is that my son has friends who are drinking, right? Like there are people who are drinking and some of them are drinking to excess, right? And I go, look, son, if you want to drink, you're going to start with me. right? And then we're going to talk about it. Like, you can't drink and drive, can't do these kind of things. You really shouldn't be doing this. But if you're going to experiment, I'd rather you experiment with me than with somebody else and you're drinking and doing these kind of things. So if you want to taste this, okay, but understand this is not something you should be doing out in the world and getting in a car. And if you ever get into a car, if that is going to be a big problem, I would rather that you call me and we'll get you an Uber, or if your friend is drinking, you do this. Because I was a designated driver in college. Like, my friends would all be drinking, and I never, alcohol's not a big thing for me. And I would just say, I'm driving, right? Give me the keys. And they're like, oh, we love you, Chris. They're all like, okay, and off we go. So I think that peer pressure of the group that you hang out with, so identifying with that group is really saying, maybe even as adults, so I've talked about is identifying with people who are supportive, the way that you want to be, and understand that God bless you. Like, I'm honestly, God bless you if this is the way that you're going to see the world. You're just not my tribe. I'm not letting you into my inner circle. I don't wish you any ill will, but my preferred indifference is to have people who are going to be supportive and caring and are going to be on my team, because I'm on their team.
Yeah.
So I think.
And then provide a supportive, affirming culture around you.
That's yes, supportive, affirming culture is what I prefer.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what we want to create.
Yes. And if you think about today's culture, it's a little bit rare, let's just say, because it's now all about putting people down and making me feel better. And not that I'm beyond a joke that's joking around with people, but you got to be really careful when you do it, because some of these things land very hard.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was really interesting. Let's talk about, we're down to number 4.
Okay. And that's, you are your position. And again, this is kind of different from the productivity and all. This is my title. And it's interesting. So I retired as a Presbyterian pastor, and I said to my wife, she and I are very egalitarian, but I served 5 churches, and she was involved in every choice. But I said, you get to pick the next church wherever we go. So she did. And I had a list of churches that I suggested. She said, we've been to this one on vacation. Let's go there. I said, okay, fine. For your first try, that's fine. And so we went there, and she said, we're done. I said, what do you mean we're done? She said, this is where we're going to go. And I said, but we haven't tried. And she said, did you say to me? And yes, of course. I realize that may sound a bit more patristic or patriarchal than I want it to, but Sarah made the choice. The thing is, it's a totally different denomination. They don't know who I am. They don't know anything about me. And that was very humbling and very necessary. One of the things in retirement you learn is that where you don't have responsibility, you don't have authority. And so let it go. So now problems come up there and I go, wow, I'm glad I'm not dealing with that one. But it was very freeing to be in a place without agendas. But it's very weird to be a pastor without portfolio. They don't remember me when, and they don't know the wonderful things I did and who I am. And I think everybody, Lord willing, if you live long enough, you will enter into maybe redeployment, but you'll have to let go of your position. And a book that's on my shelf right up there, Strength to Strength by Arthur Brooke. Have you ever heard of that, Arthur Brooks?
I have not. I feel I need to, let me grab a pen. I got to write it down.
Yeah, no, it's a really helpful book. He had 5 researchers help him write it, which gives me hope because I don't. Therefore, I feel much better about myself because I do all my own work. But anyway, in there, he says, he quotes one executive who went back to the office 6 months after retiring and nobody recognized him. And he said, I went from being who's who to who's he. I love that quote. I went from being who's who to who's he. And I think we all have to realize that a position is a privilege. It's not a right. A position is an opportunity, but it can also be a liability. If you anchor your well-being, your identity to that, you'll be disappointed because now we all want to matter. and all that. And we love to be respected for what we've done in the past and all that. Those things go without saying again, but you're going to have to let go. And I often say to people, hold it loosely and appreciate what you have.
We use the term hold it lightly, right?
Lightly,
so very similar. Isn't that funny? Hold it loosely. I said, hold it lightly. You're holding something lightly on these things. Yeah, there's a great story from Simon Sinek, and I don't remember all the details to it, but I think the person was the Secretary of Defense.
Oh.
And when he was going to speak somewhere, and when he got there, they picked him up at the airport. They took him to the hotel. As soon as he came on, he had a coffee. Everything was provided for him. Then he retired, and he's come back to the exact same place to talk, but now he's no longer the Secretary of Defense. He was just a consultant. Nobody picked him up at the airport. Nobody got him coffee. He was like, oh, I was holding space for that position. The position commanded this kind of treatment. I deserve this kind of treatment. And for some people, that can be very, let's say, shocking, like your CEO. Like all of a sudden, people aren't going, oh, that's Bob. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, they're just like, huh? Who are you again?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, good to see you again. Like that kind of fakish smile that people have. We've moved on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they do.
And I would imagine that it's tough. If we look at all these pillars in aggregate, really what we're talking about is your internal compass. And the more that you know who you are, the less you are influenced or potentially reacting to outside stimuli, right? Things that you have maybe sometimes limited control over, but you always have control over of who you are.
Right.
And how you want to show up. Mm-hmm. And how that aligns with your faith, whatever faith that is, your personal brand of integrity. So whether it's your position, what you own, the people you're with, the money you have, like whatever that is, those are, let's say, ephemeral. Right?
Mm-hmm.
These are things that at the end of the day, like you said, at some point, people are going to be remembering you. They'll be memorialized, and those things are no longer relevant, and they are not. And I would add to that all those things that you have are really just additions to your, what I would say, character or yourself.
Okay, yeah.
I think that if you look at that as just be like, these are things that I'd like to have, and I feel good about them. And it's okay to feel good about having a nice car. You don't have to give everything away. I was thinking Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So one of the things I trained with the Barrett Value Center, and it has basically the first triangle is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then they have an inverted triangle on the top of it, which is you're trying to get to, let's say, enlightenment, the top of the triangle. But the bottom of the triangle is your basic needs, like food, shelter. These are things that you may be concerned about. And then it talks about who am I? Who's my tribe of people? These are important for people. When I was doing my leadership stuff, I talked about the perfect example of this for me was Disneyland. And I'll tell you why. Because Disneyland has now controls Star Wars, it controls Marvel, and there's all the old Disney characters. So my daughter loves Winnie the Pooh. So whenever she runs into somebody at Disneyland that has a Winnie the Pooh t-shirt or anything like that, she's like, there's my people. That's my tribe, the Winnie the Pooh people. And then you go to the other people and you see them all interacting. They're all the Star Wars people. They got the Darth Vader, the lightsabers, and they're like those are my people. I'm hanging out with some of my people at Disney. And then you have all these Marvel people like, oh no, I'm into Spider-Man or what. Like everybody's looking for their tribe, right? And these are these needs. But then you get to that point of individuation. I'm a member of this tribe, but who am I?
Right.
Right. And the more you're understand yourself, the easier those other things come. It's not that you won't face difficulties. Most people are going to face at least some challenges in their life.
Oh yeah.
And some of those people who don't never start thinking about this because all they're concerned about is position, status, who I know, what I have. Right. They're totally focused on this because they never had to necessarily work for it or struggle for it. And so there's that sense of entitlement. I'm entitled to this, and God forbid you lose all of that.
Yeah. If
Then
you're not
who
ready.
are you?
Yeah.
And when you're sitting on your bed with your 8 Ferraris, right, and you're like your deathbed and going, okay, like I can't. What happens now?
Yeah.
Right? You want to look at that kind of centering of yourself. Really interesting. One of the meditations I've been doing is the Wayne Dyer. He says, I am a father. I am. The more you have that control of your identity, like your self-mastery, and the more that you can do that, the more you can, let's say, buff it against the you are this,
Right.
like from external people saying, I am a father. I am a loving father. I am a person of integrity. I am someone who cares about people. And then when people come at you and say something different, you're like, oh, that's not who I am.
Right.
Like you're able to do that. So I think it's important for people to understand that you do have control over your internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Your external dialogue, with the external information you're getting feedback you're getting from other people, you can take it or not take it. Let's loop back to Brene Brown where she says the man in the arena, right? There's all those people, right?
Yeah.
Like all these people saying, oh my God, what were you wearing? What were you doing? This, like these kind of things. She's like, look, I need to take criticisms, but I'm going to take the criticism from the man in the arena who's been doing the same thing that I am doing, or is trying to do the same thing I am, has much more value to me than just someone saying, you didn't do it the right way, but I'm too scared of doing that.
Yeah. The credibility.
Yeah. And I think it can be learned. You're more susceptible when you're younger because you're really trying to discover who you are, particularly through adolescence and even before that. Your friends, your environment, your parents obviously are difficult. I'll share with you one that I thought was interesting. I'm just kind of curious what you thought. I remember I was talking to someone who was a drug addict. And I said, that's never been something that I've gravitated to. I'm just too much of a control freak. I'd be like, I wouldn't want to do those things. Like I'm already, I joke around. I'm weird enough without chemically altering my brain. I don't trust that I wouldn't end up getting arrested for running naked down the street because I took that little part of the inhibitor in my brain and I've lowered that one. And I said, I can't relate to that. The only thing I have is drive by a pizza place and I'll be like, oh, I grew up with pizza, and I'll get that yearning, that desire.
Now you got me.
Right? So you're like, oh yeah, I grew up on the East Coast and this place has good pizza. And I'm thinking about it all the time. And this person that I was talking to says, okay, now that's how you grew up. I grew up in a family that were drug addicts. So they were doing it in front of me. That was my familial thing. And so now when I see someone or something that triggers that desire, which is one of the reasons I'm fascinated with Atomic Habits and like how to get people to change their habits of recognizing these triggers, lessening them, and understanding that just because you have this great desire to, for me, have pizza or for them to have drugs, like you have that moment where you can take a breath and say, okay, I can make a different choice than just following this kind of hardwiring in my brain. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. What voices do you listen to?
Yeah. I always encourage people. I think we'll talk about it from a faith and maybe a little less non-faith things. You have intuition on it. So your wife's example, like I found the place. You could call that she was channeling like what her character and said, I like these people. They resonate with me, this kind of thing. Or you could call it from she had a resonance with her faith. Like, this just feels right.
Yep.
Because for some reason it aligns with who you are.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we all have that. Oh, I did that. And that really wasn't part of my character. Like, nobody's perfect.
Good.
Wow. All right. That was one of the easiest podcasts I think I've ever done. So look, we have 5 minutes here, Reverend Doug. Tell us a little bit, how people can reach out to you. Now you have your ministry. So can you give us maybe we'll link it in, we'll put all the links to these things in the
Oh, okay.
when we send this out.
Sure.
But for those who are listening and maybe can't click on a link, tell us again about your ministry.
Okay.
Tell us again about your book and where we can get it.
Okay. The ministry is Lorica Ministries, Lorica, and then ministries.org. So if you want to Google Lorica Ministries, it'll come up. Our website will come up. And I've got two primary books that I've written others, but these are the primary ones we're working with right now. One is the book Soul Shaping, From Soul Neglect to Spiritual Vitality. And that has actually a workbook that goes with it and a set of videos and discussion guides that we call it the resource kit that can be used by congregations or organizations or small groups. And then my latest book is called Shaping a Leader's Soul for Lasting Impact and Joyful Living. And these are all available in print and ebook. They're not an audiobook yet, but print and ebook through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. And that book, Shaping a Leader's Soul, I'm actually using with executive cohorts of business leaders. And some of them are just open to faith. You talked about faith, and I totally respect it, Chris. I just say I'm not going to try to convert anybody. That's not my job. But I want to provide an opportunity for you to explore these concepts. And that deals with identity, start with who, destiny, pursue your ultimate contribution, and then partnership, link with God's agenda. And I just talk about how you can bring that into the business world. And that one's written more, it has 64 chapters, and they're more like blogs. I've learned that leaders don't like long chapters. 750 to 1,000 words. So I wrote that book to be more accessible for leaders.
Yeah, distill that down for me, right?
That's right. Executive summary.
Yeah, executive summary. I like that. And I'll share with us, I remember one story that it was either Jack Canfield, because you mentioned him earlier, or I can't remember. I think it was Jack Canfield who talked about someone who had all the money in the world. He had bought his football team and he was known. And one of his friends said, "Hey, come with me. We're going to go donate. We got a charity. We're going to take wheelchairs to these people who need them." And I'm thinking it was in Africa. Again, if I'm murdering the story, I apologize. But here's this very wealthy person, very famous, has all these kind of things that you were talking about.
Yeah.
The status, I'm hanging out with the right people. I do these kind of things. He goes out and he's donated to the charity. He's actually giving the wheelchair out to this person. And they come over and they hug him. And they went, "Oh," like that moment.
Now I get it.
"Oh, now I get it. Sure. I've attained all this, but this is more valuable to me than many of the things that I have accumulated." And so I think to that idea of giving back is important, and whatever form that takes. So obviously for you, dealing with people and sharing your faith and your vision on these things and your books and these ability to work, so is one way of doing that, right? Is to continue with that core kind of personality that you have of, I want to help people. I want to help people find their faith if they're interested, or find some way just to be successful, even if that's the way they want to go. Yeah. And I really think that's beautiful. It really is.
Yeah. Amen.
All right. Reverend Doug, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Chris.
For those of you who have made it this far in the podcast, of course, we'd appreciate it if you joined the A Squared Lamp Groups and subscribe to the podcast. But at the end of the day, what we really want you to get out of this is something that resonated with you that you can implement into your life or in your family's life or into your business life. I think there's a lot here that you can use, and hopefully we've given you something that will inspire and maybe drive you to find more comfort in yourself.
Good.
Thank you again, and we'll see you on our next episode. Podcast team coordinator for A Squared Lamp Groups. Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Stop Digging Community Podcast. Keep the conversation going. Search for the Stop Digging group on LinkedIn, and don't miss out on our next episode.